Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Tchenovstok, and welcome back to Tchenovstok in episode 16 of the series. In this exclusive patron episode, guys, we will be building a Cosmodrome in Tchenovstok. A Cosmodrome is basically kind of like your Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So it's a series of launch pads where, rockets are launched and whatnot. So let's just say that the Tchenovstok Cosmodrome is a top secret location where, rocket technology goes to be tested. More secretive projects are launched from Tchenovstok instead of in Baikonur in Kazakhstan. So in Kazakhstan, that's like the most well-known location where Soyuz rockets can be launched even today. There's another launch site in, I think, Western Russia that's fairly new. I think that one's pretty commonly used now too, but it's less known. But of course, there's Tchenovstok as well, which is the most secretive one. Anyways, this wasn't a super huge project, but it was kind of interesting because I used PO as you're seeing me use on my screen right now. So I hardly know anything about it. I still need to get used to it. But what I wanted to do is to make this building bigger because it comes with a series of garage doors on the face of it. And I wanted those garage doors to become big enough to fit a rocket. So essentially the rocket would be built on its side within these warehouses, and it would then be trained out to the launch site. And then I think the way that it's actually done in Baikonur is exactly this. So it's built on its side in a warehouse, and then they haul it out on this big train where it's lifted vertically and then installed onto the launch pad. So this is exactly how it's going to work at this launch site. Yeah, so I just wanted those doors to be able to fit a rocket in. I really wasn't knowledgeable enough with procedural objects to make just the doors bigger. That would have taken a lot of finicking and figuring out. So I figured, the next best thing is just to make the whole building bigger. And that is exactly what I did. So of course, this area is kind of on the outskirts of the map. It's quite far from the city. So there was a train track that just kind of ended at the quarry. So I continued that train track over to this location. And there was also a stretch of road that just kind of ended right after the airport. That is actually right after the quarry. So I just expanded that road and extended it all the way over here. And the reason why I built it over here, it was pretty much the only location on the map that was suitable for this kind of build. It was flat land, and I kind of like that it's kind of on a desert plain. So in this map theme, I think this is sand. This is the way that the sand texture looks like. So there's a few quite large spots on the map with this texture. And I quite liked it because it kind of looks like Baikonur, which, by the way, this whole launch pad site is based on Baikonur. So I think the Soyuz launch pad is it's designed to be a certain way. So you can't really change too much of the launch pad. It has to be designed to accommodate the rocket, or rather the rocket was built to accommodate these launch pads. So they all kind of look the same. So I was looking at Baikonur, and I was also looking at the one in Western Russia. I forget the name of the city that it's in. And they all look identical. So I figured, I'm just going to study the Soyuz launch pad the best I can and build something that looks somewhat like it. What I think is crazy is that these launch sites have been around since the 50s, and they're still being used today. So I'm sure that they've somewhat been modernized in some way, but the actual design of these launch sites have not changed at all in 70 years. And same thing with the actual Soyuz rocket. The design hasn't changed since the 50s. I know they've modernized the internals, the cockpit and all the controls and whatever else. But the design of the rocket and how it works hasn't changed since the 50s. But it just goes to show just how reliable Soviet technology could be. So yeah, I mean, why change something if it works, right? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. That's the most Soviet motto you can ever say. But same thing with these launch pads, if it works, and it's been proven to work reliably for 1,500 of these Soyuz launches, so why change anything, right? So basically, I'm just trying to get these launch pads to look as close to real as I can. They're basically these giant concrete structures. What's kind of funny is that most of the launch pads at Kennedy Space Center, NASA spent billions of dollars designing like a sound suppression system. So when a rocket is launched, there's these huge water pumps that'll spray mist under the rocket engines to kind of dampen the sound. The Russians didn't really account for this at all. They just didn't care. So instead of designing, a super complex and expensive sound dampening system, they just dug a giant hole in the ground and called it a day. So I always thought that was kind of funny. So that's why these launch pads here are kind of raised on this giant concrete platform with a giant hole underneath it. It's just like a giant crevice which allows all the exhaust from the rocket to be dissipated in these giant holes. So I built this nice platform here, and there's actually these really nice Soyuz launch pads on the workshop. The only thing is I had to convert this to PO as it was interfering with the ground, because I wanted to lower it into the ground. So you'll see like exactly what I've done here is I've just raised it a little bit. It still looks really cool. It looks like it's part of this pad here, and it makes it look a little bit more, I guess, complex. Because just, there's extra props and whatever on the pre-made pad. And the pad also includes a rocket. Now, I'm not sure if this rocket is actually supposed to launch from this pad. I don't know if it's functional in any way. It's not anymore, of course, because I've converted it into a procedural object building. But it still looks cool. The only downside about this is the rocket that's on the pad is the modern Russian Soyuz rocket. There's a Soviet model on the workshop, which I have, but there's no real way of me to plop it on this launch pad. Another thing too is the launch pad doesn't exactly look like the real thing, unfortunately. It would be kind of impossible for me to build something that looks exactly like the real thing. So first of all, the color of like the framing of these launch pads are green in real life, and they look a little different than what's been plopped here, but it's no big deal. We can just say that some minor revisions were made when building this site here. Now, in this giant pit, so in real life, these giant pits are actually made out of concrete. What I've done here is like the lower surface of the pit is going to be dirt, but I've added like these giant concrete structures on either side, just to prevent like dirt and all sorts of stuff flying all over the place. So I'm not actually gonna I'm not actually gonna fill in the bottom of these pits with concrete. I'm just gonna leave it dirt. Although thinking back now, I probably could have using these underpass. I probably could have. There's like a ton of giant concrete structures that I have in my prop menu that I probably could have plopped down, but no big deal. Now the Tchenovstok Cosmodrome will have 2 launch pads, so it's relatively small. I think the one in Baikonur has like 10 or maybe a dozen. I'm not quite sure, but looking at maps, there is definitely a ton more than here. I didn't really feel like it was necessary to build a bunch of these, and I'm kind of constrained with like the amount of space that I have, of course. So 2 launch pads will be just fine. And this too, with this being more of a top secret location, it can't really be huge. And I mean, there's only like some testing launches and things like that. They're going to be launched here, so not a super busy site. So that just adds a little bit more to the realism, I guess. So 2 launch pads are more than enough for this location. And of course, I'm not going to build the second launch pad from scratch. I'm just going to copy paste using the Move It tool into its new location. I'm gonna have to revise it a little bit because it kind of screwed with the terrain. I kind of expected that though when using the move it tool, but it was actually really painless moving this around. You know, I just had to play around with the terrain a little bit to fix everything up, but it took like 2 minutes to do this. So with the launch pads being complete, that is gonna pretty much complete this build. I'm gonna add a little bit more details to like the actual building facility and you know, prop up the area just a tad. You see me plop down like some foliage and stuff and some rocks, of course. So, you know, just some little general things that I normally do to beautify these types of areas. That's gonna be the rest of this episode. But to be honest, guys, like, I had a ton of fun building this. It's something that I wanted to do day one, but I kind of always intended for this kind of episode to be exclusive for you guys. So I know some of my patrons are more fans of the Tchenovstok series. You know, that's why they chose to support the channel. And I posted a poll a little while ago on YouTube asking you guys which is your favorite series, and Timbuktu is by far the most popular series, but close second place is Tchenovstok. I forget like the percentages now, but there is a sizable percentage of people who definitely like Tchenovstok a bit more. And you know, it's a unique series. Like, there's not a ton of Soviet, let alone Russian series about city skylines on YouTube. So I'm grateful to be a part of such a unique project. I'm so glad that I've undertook this huge project. And yeah, I mean, it was just a ton of fun. So with this being the very final episode of Tchenovstok, and on top of that, it being an exclusive patron episode, I think the least I can do is explain to you guys what's going to happen for the series that's going to replace Tchenovstok. And I'll let you guys know right off the bat that the new series will take place in South Africa. And it's going to be a modern series. So again, I'm trying to stick with these not so common themes when building new cities. So a South African city or even an African city in general is not something that has been built at all in City Skylines before. There might be a couple of series maybe. I haven't really checked out any, but I know for a fact that it's not a common type of city that anybody's going to build. So that's why I chose that. It's going to be a ton of fun, something different. I've mostly been building like northern type cities. So Tchenovstok is like being the northernmost by far. I mean, it's almost in the Arctic Circle, but even Timbuktu is quite north. So it's going to be my first tropical kind of city and based in the southern hemisphere. So I think it's going to be a ton of fun. It's definitely going to be a challenge for me. I'm planning on building a ton of interesting things around that area. So one of the first things that you think about when you think South Africa is like safaris and nature and savanna and all those types of things. So I'm going to try to include as much as those types of stereotypical things in the new map. I've chosen a map just while making this episode, so I'm really excited to get started on that. So I'm not sure when the first episode is going to be released, but I assure you guys that you'll be the first ever to see it, with you guys being patrons, of course. So stay tuned for that, guys, because it shouldn't be too long before I'm able to release the first episode. Well, guys, the Cosmodrome is nearing completion, and the end of this episode is fast approaching. If you'd like to download the Tchenovstok map, it is available right now on my Patreon page. Just check in my post history and you should be able to find it quite easily. A few of you asked me to create some asset list or like an asset collection for the series. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that because it would be kind of challenging at this point, because I have to add each item one by one, and I have thousands of them. Steam limits asset collections to 1,000, so I would have had to build like a collection within a collection, and at this point that was going to kind of be a little too challenging, so I wasn't able to do that. But what you can do is when you download the Tchenovstok map, there's an option to enable every mod and asset required to run the map in your City Skylines menu. So go ahead and do that, because that'll automatically subscribe to every mod and every asset that I had to build Tchenovstok. So that's the easiest way that I would advise you go about it. So anyways, guys, that is it for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you enjoyed the series as a whole. And I hope that you're as excited as I am for what's to come in the South African series. So guys, as usual, please give this video a thumbs up. I'm sure you're already subscribed if you're a patron, I would hope. And until the next episode, guys, please take care and enjoy these awesome cinematics coming up right now.